Welcome to the Athletes in Motion podcast, from race to recovery, with your hosts, Tom Riegel and Kenny Bailey.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
I'm fantastic. Kenny, how are you?
I am doing fantastic, and I want to welcome back to our program Tim Sorensen from Multisport Endurance Academy. Did I say it correctly?
You did. You did.
Owner, founder, and owner of lots and lots of medals. Can we just appreciate all the medals?
Let's appreciate the medal. Yeah,
he knows things.
Quick round of applause for the medals.
So,
Outstanding.
Tim, thanks for joining us today. Why we have you here is as a tri coach, and Tom, you're a tri coach as well. So I'm going to be an observer on this one. As you know, we're doing this series around triathlete's journey, and one of the things that we're in sort of the dog days of summer, if you will. And so what we wanted to talk about is sort of those things that we know that the training program is getting long now. There's a lot of very heavy programs. It's getting tedious. People are starting to have, if I dare say, the oh shit moment of like, okay, this thing is real. It's coming up. I got a big race coming up. So we just want to kind of talk through those kind of feelings that people have, and how as coaches do you try to help people stay on point? How do we make sure that they're still, the eye is on the prize when you're kind of in the middle or at the tail end of the slog? So I guess first order of business, Tim, is sort of what is your reference point for your clients when they say, 100-degree weather out, we're going to be doing another 60 miles. I got to get up early again on a Saturday. How do you keep them motivated, or what is your reference?
That's a fantastic question, and a lot of
I ask fantastic questions.
Good. I'm really glad, because this would have been super awkward if you didn't. The best way to do it is to try and make the workouts fun. I mean, I've got a lot of athletes that just go check those boxes, and that's where the tedious part comes in. Is like, I got to get my bike, I got to get my run, I got to get my swim, and then I can get on with my day. Right. One of the biggest differences between a 70.3 and an Ironman are the weekends. And if your weekends are like, I got to get up at 4:30 in the morning so I can check that box and then get on with my day, it makes it very difficult to enjoy the workouts. Whereas if you can switch that a little bit and make sure that you're actually having fun, instead of, man, I got to do a 100-mile bike ride, I'm just going to go out and do it on the course that I've done it on over and over again, as opposed to saying, hey, let's go find a really cool place to go for a bike ride. I'm in, I don't want to say Central California, but I'm in Sacramento, California, which is about 2 hours from the coast, and it can get really hot in the Sacramento Valley. So on days when we know that we got to do 100 miles, we'll jump in the car and head out to the coast, and then just ride our bikes up and down the coast. It's not that far, and it makes it a whole lot more fun. Enjoy the scenery. It's still a fairly challenging terrain over there. So just to really dig into trying to the best you can to make it fun. Remember why we're doing this in the first place, because we kind of like swimming and biking and running.
Yeah.
And what am I saying here? What's your typical, for your athletes, what's the season look like? Is it a long season for them? And how do you break that season up? Do they have races all the way through to the end of the year? I mean, certainly out in California, you can stretch it much, much further. Things start to wrap up a little bit quicker. But for the basis, the majority of your athletes, are you dealing with a full season of 8-10 months? Or are you looking at shorter? Do you have athletes that just do the first 6 months of the year and then take the rest off? Or how does that
honestly, I've got both. I've got athletes that wait till the very last moment. They're like, well, how long does it take to train for an Ironman? The honest question is, it depends upon the athlete. I don't know.
Yeah.
I had one athlete just came on, and he's like, well, when I'm looking on the internet, I see these, 5 and 6 month Ironman plans, and even 4 months Ironman plans. So I figured that's enough time to train for an Ironman. And this particular guy is lucky because he's in really, really good shape. So, when I started off, my first question is, well, what's the longest you've ran in the past month? Because I have to have a base to start from. And if the longest you've ran in the past month is a 5K, then we've got a wicked parabolic curve to try and get you up to an
Mhm.
Ironman distance.
Yeah.
So I like to have a 10-month plan when somebody's looking to say, hey, I've not done an Ironman before, or I have done an
Mhm.
Ironman before, but I want to get the best I can out of it. I like a 10-month or a 40-week plan,
Mhm.
because that way, and then I have to
40
dial it
weeks, you
back
can
a little
birth
bit.
an Ironman.
Yeah, yeah. But then as far as the season goes,
Yeah.
a full Ironman is going to be unique in that, where's the race? I mean, a lot of athletes don't do the race that's in their backyard. They like to do, call it a trication, and go wherever the race takes them. Now, in that, one of the conversations I have with my athlete is, are you a cold weather racer or are you a hot weather racer? I have some athletes that are like, I don't do well in the heat. So we're looking for like early season races. You know, Oceanside 70.3 in April. There's an early season full 140.6 escapes me right now, but some people don't do well in the
Texas
cold.
is pretty early in the winter, I think, or early in the season, isn't it?
Is it?
I think.
No, I don't think it is. I think it's a little bit later. But anyway, I don't do well in the cold at all. I'm useless in the cold. So I make sure that any races that I do are going to be August or September, something like that works well for me. So to kind of answer your question, the season depends upon, kind of what, how developed the athlete is. Some athletes are just one and done. Get me in, check that box, get me out. I want to train for race and I'm out. And then I've got other athletes that I've been training for 10 years. And you're like, okay, what's the race? What's the next race? And then we just choose that and push it on through. Also, to kind of answer your question, I like to have an A race, a B race, and a C race. So let's just say, example, your A race is Ironman California, and that's in October. Yeah. Well, right about 7 weeks prior to that is Ironman Santa Cruz 70.3. And that's a really good B race. And that's also kind of a do or a die point. Prior to that is Oregon, which is also kind of close. But those are really good intermittent races. So if you get to Oregon, and let's just say as a general, and this is a massive general rule of thumb, that you take your half Ironman time, double it, and add an hour, and that's going to give you kind of an idea of about what you're capable of doing for a full. And if your Ironman 70.3 time is 8.5 hours because you just haven't been putting in the training, you double that and add an hour, you got to wonder whether or not you've actually got the ability to finish a a full that's 8 weeks away.
Yeah.
So and then the C races, those would be like an Olympic distance race where those are fun, right? Those kind of keep you motivated because you go out, it's Phil Tilt Boogie, right? You just kind of have fun with that one and get a good tempo workout. So
yeah.
So Tom, do you generally subscribe to that too? Is it a 9-month thing for you, 10-month thing, or what do you?
Yeah, I usually do the same. And I really love the ABC race type thing, because that's when we go back to talking about how do we make it fun? How do we make the year a little bit more viable? Like, we've got the ups and downs. Like, if you can stick in some of these other races, you've got smaller targets to hit that are coming up closer and quicker, instead of just thinking, okay, I've got 10 months. How do you keep yourself motivated for 10 months through the summer and going through that way? So yeah, no, I totally subscribe to the same philosophies on that. And C races themselves mean so much. I mean, B races are important. They're good metrics, but the C races, I think that's the stuff that really keeps you happy, keep you fired up. Even if you're just going and volunteering at a race, that helps you keep that energy of why you're here, right? Why are we doing this? Why do we do the sport? Once you're at that point, you get the vibe of the people, everyone getting ready for the race, and you're doing all of that stuff, and you just feel that energy, and that just lights me up. I mean, I just see people just get excited about that. So I highly encourage, volunteering at races, along with doing a lot of sea races, sprints, and Olympics, just to work on just the process flow, the flow of transitions, the flow of easy stuff, right? And then you can get your training in at the end of the day, right? Go out and train after a sprint race, right? You can get some other stuff in, but at least you get the flow of your transitions, you get that practice, and that kind of keeps everybody motivated through the year.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Go ahead, Kenny.
No, I just think it's, as an athlete, like you said, you the monotony of going out on the courses, like you said, you're doing the same course. Pool swims are the worst, right? So you're doing the same course and all that sort of stuff. And then when you show up to these things, it kind of reminds you that, oh, okay, I have a number, I have a bib on, you get that juice, that other people around, you get that kind of that sense of community, that sense of going back to your why, right? Which is like, okay, this is a lot of fun. And it kind of reignites that, where in the past I've done where I've only trained for one event. I didn't do any other races, and you get to that event and suddenly it's almost a shock, right? It's like, if you don't have those to practice, if you will, just the bigness of the event, that could actually be a difficult thing to do.
I think.
Well, and you're 100%. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I think you're 100% right on that one, Kenny. Because if you race a lot, you get good at racing, right? You can go out there and you can put in all the training, right? You can have, the swim base, the run base, the bike base. But if you're not actually racing, then you're not going to be very experienced at racing. Yeah. And then
this feels like it's going to cut in a little too soon here, Tim. A little too soon. Go ahead. Go ahead. Too soon. But go ahead. Keep talking.
But not going out and exposing yourself to the events. Yes. Careful. Context means a lot right there. Not being exposed to the event, to be in the energy of the event. Just the actual, to Tom's point, the flow of the transitions, right? To get from one, even if you're not, and I'll actually do this with my athletes. I don't want you to go out there and race this event to see if you can beat anybody. I want you to go out and test some of your pacing, right? And that still gets you in the flow of being around a lot of people and actually setting up your strategy for the event, so that when you show up, there's not so much anxiety and it's just another day at the office. Like, hey, I'm used to this environment of racing, and this is easy for me. Where a lot of people are like, hey, I've got one race for the year, I'm going to show up, I'm going to do that race, and then everything is new and everything is not as comfortable as it could be, as if you had more experience just being in the environment.
Yeah, and the post-race letdown is less, right?
Yeah.
When you do that build up to that one event where it just peaks and all the way, the fall off on the other side of it is like, okay, now what, right? But if
I can tell from experience.
If you prepare yourself,
let me chime in on this one. Yeah, I mean,
tell us about that, Kenny.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's what I did this year. The only race I had was a half Ironman, and I put all my eggs in that basket, right? And it didn't turn out well. And to your point, I didn't show up to any previous races to practice racing, to practice that feeling of being around, waiting in line, waiting in a swim line. Like when you go to practice a swim and you just go in the water and go, and then having to stand there for 30 minutes to get in the water is a completely different experience, right? Yeah. It's just, your wetsuit's been on for 30 minutes. You're already sweating like crazy in it. You got a bunch of people nervous around you, that whole thing. And then once you get in it, I mean, that whole beginning of the race is, to practice that, to your point. I think the critical thing that I think we're all trying to say is, it's not just a physical thing. You could be physically capable to do something, but if you're not ready to understand the philosophy of the race, or there's the race itself, that can also be a detriment as well. So Tim, you mentioned a lot, and we talked about it before we came on too, about the why, and you're a big proponent of that. Could you kind of expand on that, sort of why that's important, or you that's a pretty big philosophy for you? So
it's huge. I think it's the biggest. There's a lot. I have athletes come to me and their friend did an Ironman, right? And they're like, well, I'm in better shape than that guy is. I can do an Ironman, right? Or they lost a bet and they have to do an Ironman because they lost.
Always
the
best, right?
Well, right. Or
that's a hell of a reason.
I've had it. I had a guy come.
I finished last in my fantasy football team, and now I have to do an Ironman.
I don't know if that was it, but a guy came to me and he
That's
had 3 months till Ironman Cabo, and he was a bodybuilder. He was not an endurance guy. And he goes, yeah, I've contacted a few triathlon coaches and they won't train me because I have 3 months to Ironman Cabo San Lucas and I don't swim. And he was right. He didn't swim. I told him straight up, and I'm like, I can't promise you I'm going to get you to the finish line, but I can get you to the start line, and hopefully I can keep you from drowning in the swim. So I spent a lot of time with this guy, and I mean, he was hell bent to get this race done, and I was shocked at how far he actually got in the event. He got to mile 80 on the bike before he quit because literally everything went wrong. He breaststroked the entire 2.5 miles with his goggles on his forehead because he wouldn't put his face in the water.
Wow.
His why was, I'm gonna get this done no matter what. There are other athletes that, you know, I just think this is kind of cool. I want to do this. You know, I think it would be cool to wear the tattoo so I could walk around and brag about it. But this is the time right now where whatever that why is the most important, because as soon as you're getting in, like you said, the dog days of summer, right now, let's just say you're training for Ironman California right now, we've got 7 weeks until Ironman California. So this is where we're actually merging the build phase and getting into the peak phase. So your volume is about as high as it's possibly going to be right now. And that's where it gets monotonous. You're constantly tired. You haven't seen your friends. You can't party on the weekends because you got to get up and you got to get these massive workouts in. And that's where you start to get a serious case of, I'm trying to filter my language here. That's where you start to get uncomfortable.
We don't care.
Yeah, you start to get a serious case of fuck it all, and then it's just it's hard to push through that. So if your why, whatever reason, why are you doing this, right? You got to remember what that why is, and for everybody it's different, right? Like I said, for some people they lost a bet. For some people they're doing it for other people. Now, when I'm having the conversation, I try to make sure that any athlete that I work with, I'm like, and I'll ask that. I'm like, why are you doing this? And I'll get like, well, I'm doing it for my mom. And I'm like, well, is she still alive? And they say no. And I'm like, okay, well, good on you, but you need to do this for you, you know? And at the end of the day, are you enjoying what you're doing, right? When it gets really monotonous and you still like to go out and ride your bike, or you go, instead of going for just that run to get it done, you go out and you find a beautiful trail and I just kind of relax into the workouts. You gotta remember that you like the workouts. You know, and again, it doesn't matter what the why is. It just has to be a strong enough why to, you know, for
it's got to be authentic, right? It's got to be something that, like you said,
the old cliche, you know, if you've got a strong enough why, you can achieve any what, right? And you just need to know what that is and make friends with it, because whether or not it's in the training or even in the race, you know, when you're at mile 15 on the run of an Ironman, you start to think, why the hell am I doing this? This sucks, right? And if you still can grasp onto that why, you remember why you're doing it, and that's going to get you through both hard days of training and racing.
Yeah.
So for a question for the both of you then, it's how do you remind people of that without beating it over their heads? You know, I know my why, but you know, still it's it's 80% humidity. It's 95 degrees out. I got a 60 mile, 70 mile, 80 mile bike ride I got to get in front of me, or whatever, 4 hours. How do you remind, you know, what is your methodology you guys try to use to help sort of remind people of that without sort of, you know, being overt? Or are you overt? Or is that something you need to, you know, just snap into them? Like, remember why you're doing this.
I think as a coach, it's important for us to know each athlete's why, like the real deal why. Like, so it's important for us to know that and kind of make a note of it and keep it on the side. And then each athlete is also going to respond to different stimulus, right? So there's going to be the ones that you just need to snap and be hard at them and going like, yeah, stop being an ass, you know, stop being a pussy, get out there and just do it, right? Go. And you have the other ones that you need to be a little bit softer with, and you have to just gently go back to, helping them understand their why, right? Remember having a conversation of bringing it up in a way that you go, remember, we talked about XYZ, and they just, yeah, this is my why. This is kind of bringing them back to, it has to be their decision. It has to be them coming up with the idea of bringing it back. It's just how you do it totally varies on the athletes themselves. I've had both ends of the spectrum, where there's some that you just have to snap at and just go, because that's what they thrive off of. They thrive off of that staff sergeant kind of thing. That's what they want somebody to yell at. They want to yell at themselves. They want somebody to yell at them. All good and great. It's not my style, right? But, and then everyone else is more cerebral, where you can actually talk through it and kind of go, yeah, here's your why, here's what's going on. But it's critical for us to know exactly what their why is.
That's spot on, Tom. The working with the different athletes. I don't tend to be the sergeant type of coach. I'm more of an encourager. I find myself doing what I'm not predisposed to doing, is listening. I sit and listen, and a lot of times, I end up being almost a therapist, and then just helping the athlete work through the issue. And they'll remember the why just by having a conversation with them. So and that's one of the nice things about being a coach is, instead of working, and I don't have a whole bunch of athletes that I work with. So each athlete that I work with, it's a personal relationship, right? And I encourage the athlete. The athlete leans on me. I lean on the athlete, and that's what's fun to me, working, helping somebody achieve something so monumental. For both of us.
Yeah, and it's funny because I remember the why I had for my first one was Mike Riley saying my name. Like, that was it. Like, it wasn't any more or less than that. It was the fact that Mike Riley, for those that don't know, Mike Riley is the voice of Ironman and since retired. But the idea, I mean, it literally gave me goosebumps, right? I'm in the middle of a 16-mile run I got to do, and it's mile 12, and it's gross, and I'm just keep hearing him say my name, like, Kenny Bailey, you're an Ironman. I'm like, that's the thing. It's like, it's whatever. It could be, it doesn't have to be, I'm doing it for my mom because she's always or it could just be a stupid thing like Mike Riley saying your name, but as long as it pulls you, right? As long as it gets you there. So
yeah, it really doesn't matter what your why is, as long as it's personal and important to you.
Yeah. So, there's we talked about earlier, there's, I think now, to your point, you're 7 weeks away from Ironman. You may have done a half and it wasn't as successful as you're hoping it was going to be. There's an oh shit moment that occurs. Do I guess, can you sense when an athlete's like, is there a difference between, I don't know if I can do this, and just lack of confidence, or they truly just, they shouldn't be out there because they're going to, either they just didn't put the work in, or just they may harm themselves or whatever? Do you know when that athlete's at that juncture? And at what point, what do you try to do to help them kind of either go A or B? I mean, I guess I'm trying to be careful in saying that you always want to encourage people, but you don't want to encourage them to do stuff if they, like you said, if you're pulling them without a why at this point, then it doesn't make a lot of sense. But at the same time, people are going to be down, right? And you need to be able to say, you can do this. There's going to have self-doubt. How do you distinguish between that? I guess that's the question. How do you distinguish between that self-doubt versus like they just truly aren't ready?
That's a super sticky place to be. Tom, do you have a good answer for that?
No.
Well, I do.
Because it's like super uncomfortable. It's like, hey,
here you go, Tom.
I actually have a great answer for it, but I actually almost wanted to hear, Tom, if you had a good answer for it, because it's a very, very awkward place to be.
It's really tricky. I don't think I have a good answer for it, because to me, it's very athlete dependent at that point of the relationship and how close I am with them, or how closely we're working, what they're going through. I haven't had a point where an athlete is just not ready for a race that's coming up, that's big, where I've had to like rope them back. I've had athletes that are going to do okay, not as good as they wanted for whatever reasons, for injuries or other stress that's kind of come through, where it's gone through, where it's like, okay, we're going to go through, we just reset expectations. And I think that's the key.
So there's a reframing that occurs
at
right
the start. Yeah. It's like, and I do that through the process as we set what the goals are at the beginning of the working relationship. And we go through and we check back on those back and forth. As we get closer to race day, that's where we do the reframe. That's where we sit back and go, where are we at? How are we going? What were we able to do? We see this. And then here's what our expectations are for race day. Right. And that goes right up to race day. The night before, it should be what do we expect? Because now we know what our reality is and all of that stuff. And we try to make sure that we go in that point, here's our truly realistic expectations. So
on full Ironmans, that's where I would tend to have that sort of a conversation. 70.3 is not so much, and never on an Olympic. But on a 70 on a full, I am convinced at this point that unless something goes catastrophically wrong, if all you do is the training, you can do it, right? If we set up an appropriate training plan and all you do is just follow the plan, you can do it. Like I said, if something goes catastrophically wrong, if you get injured, if you get a life circumstances that puts a massive hole in your training, certain situations like that will prevent you from actually being able to do the training. And then obviously there's a different outcome. But yeah, for you know, I've seen people cross the finish line of an Ironman that you would look at and you go, how the hell did that happen? Right? You know, whether they're morbidly obese or they're missing limbs or they're really old, or I mean, just kind of start to come up with all the excuses that people use. And I've seen those run across the finish line of an Ironman. So if like it just put in the training and you'll get it done, right? So as an encouraging coach, I will encourage the athlete, and there's going to be a whole lot of workouts that aren't getting done, and I'll still encourage the athlete as best as I can, and they're still not getting done. And then when we come across, you know, a 70.3 that's 8.5 hours long, at that point you say, okay, well, here's the situation. You have a goal, and that goal is to complete an Ironman. At this point, the odds of you completing that Ironman are getting lower and lower and lower. And I'm not going to say it's not possible, because I've seen some crazy shit happen. But I'm just going to say it's getting harder and harder and harder. Now, you've got a couple of options at this point. You can either defer or just keep pushing through and see how far you get, right? Because here's the cool part. We talked about it a little bit earlier. If you race, then you have the experience of racing. So for a first-time Ironman, you've never done one before, sign up, see how far you get. If you finish, 2 enthusiastic thumbs up. If you don't, you just paid massive tuition for your race next year. Right. And that experience just pays dividends, right? So now you know what the finish line of an Ironman, the starting line of an Ironman feels like. You know what T1 feels like. And if you made it to the run, you know what T2 feels like. But that is a sensitive conversation to have with the athlete, because you know at that point they're feeling down, right? You know, if you're
and so what about the other end, where it's sort of like there's just massive self-doubt, right? I mean, the bigness of it, because in April you're thinking in October, you know, that's you know, a lifetime away. Then all of a sudden it's September, and you can count on one hand like the amount of time you have left, and that oh shit moment hits. How do you help encourage those folks to kind of like, you've got this, like it's, or if they're on the edge, just to say, you know, just reset expectations? Because I know that could be really difficult. I know personally, if I'm back at the pack, I don't want to do it. I'm highly competitive. I hate myself for it. But I know that if I'm going to, you know, if I'm coming in, last year was an injury. So I knew that the injury was going to be what it was. But you know, there's that, it's not just, I want to finish it. I want to finish it leaning in, right? Or someone wants some set of expectations, but then, like you said, because of life circumstances or whatever else, you got to kind of change that. Or they're just feeling unsure. what's your kind of, your coach speak, your rah-rah talk to kind of like, look, you got this? Is it back to that why again, or is it?
No,
Is it?
there's always going to be a little bit of the why in there, but that's where you just start using time. Like I said, a really rough guess, because that's the wonderful thing about triathlon is there's so many things that can go wrong that the best athlete isn't always the one that wins. But one of my athletes actually, she said, "Yeah, I can't do it. This is too much. My time at Salem was so slow, and I can't do it." And I said, "Oh, let's just add it up, right? Let's look at your 70.3 time, double it, and add an hour. That's 16 hours. Would you be happy doing it in 16 hours?" And she's like, "Oh, hell yeah!" And I'm like, "Well, there you go. We already show that you can do that. If we take the times that you've been doing in your training and figure, okay, well, just do the math on it. This is how long it's going to take you to do the swim. This is roughly how long it's been taking you to do your bikes. And this is roughly how long you've been taking it to do the runs. And you can throw some transitions in there and it still comes up to 16 hours. Are you okay with that?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Well, there you go.
There we go. Right.
Yeah. You just kind of start throwing logic at them. And then, there's no reason to say no.
Logic.
Logic.
I think the other thing that goes along with the why is, what does failure look like? And what do you define failure as? I think each athlete looks at that. As a coach and an athlete, I don't have a lot of failure. I don't know what failure is, because as long as you're learning from something, you're not failing at it, right? So you get to the start line, that's huge, right? You go to the next step, is like you got through maybe mile 80 of the bike, and that's where the wheels came off and you just had to stop at that point. So you look back at it and say, well, is that failure? Like, no, you got to the start line, you had a good swim, you got to this, go through the pieces of it. I tend to be very positive in my outlook on things. I always look for the positive sides of things. And I think that that definition of what failure actually is, I mean, that's something that you keep coming back to, is like an athlete that goes through a bummer of a time, doesn't have a good race, and you just go like, yeah, but you got up, the sun came up the next morning, everything is still good. Your paycheck doesn't require you to, it's not like you can't feed your family now. I mean, this is, let's put this in perspective and really readdress what failure is. I mean, it's not much. So
yeah, it's to the same point. I've got all these little sayings like, "There's no failure, only feedback," right? You redefine that, and it's like, oh, okay, well, you're racing. If you look at your racing, and then you go back in your training, your race day is generally a reflection of your training. But if you're not happy with your race, you go back to your training. And again, this is if nothing catastrophically went wrong, if you didn't get a mechanical, or you didn't break a metatarsal in your foot or whatever. Some days are great and some days are just harder, right? Hopefully that harder isn't race day. But just go back and use every single one of those as a learning experience. And I know that Kenny is very competitive. I've known Kenny for quite some time, and it's important to me, and I start off the relationship with my athletes this way. It's important to me to have the conversation with the athlete that we don't know anything about the other athletes. If you're at the top of the food chain and you're Lucy Charles and you're competing with Daniela Reef, those two follow each other very, very closely. They know what their splits are, right? They know what they do together. They can compete against each other because it's almost like competing with themselves, because they follow each other so closely. But me, some random guy, 50-plus-year-old out there on the course running along, the guys next to me, in front of me, and I don't have any idea if they're an ex-professional, if they're just an idiot and pushing way too hard, or if they're super fast and I know nothing about them. So for me to compete with them is just stupid, right? So I need to go out there and I have the conversation with my athletes. Know your zones, stay in your zones, right? I picked this up from another coach a long time ago, but in a 70.3, you stay in your zones all the way up until about mile 9 to 10-ish on the run. And then on a 70 point, or on a full 140.6, you stay in your zones all the way up until mile 18 on the run. Because what happens, and this has never, ever, ever served me wrong. If you find out what your swim effort should be and you stay there, right? And if you're using a power meter, you stay in your power zones on the bike. And then on a 70.3, you get to mile 9 on the run. And I'm like, at mile 9, if you got a bunch of extra energy and you're pissed at me, you can sprint the last 4 miles.
Hammer it.
Yeah.
Never once has anybody sprinted the last 4 miles. And especially on a 140.6. Stay in your zones all the way to mile 18. And if you're at mile 18 and you got a shit ton of extra energy and you're pissed at me for making you go slow, then sprint it. And again, never once has anybody said, damn you for making me go too slow. So, So just
I think the hard part, to your guys' point, the hard part is having to reset the expectations, right? Like I have an expectations of what my split time should be. And if I don't meet those expectations, I'm hard on myself, and I get it. I've got issues, but it's, I will feel it's a disappointment.
Yeah.
I understand. Not logical. I'm not trying to not trying to be logical, but I think the hard part, to your guys' point, is because of a life circumstance, an injury, or you moved, or a job change, and it requires you to have more time at the office, or something happened with the family, or whatever, or it's that shifting of expectations. It's that, okay, you were here with your expectations because the training was going well, you're doing great, you're physically able to do this. Now it's got to be here. I think that to me, that hard part is, am I going to finish or not, or am I going to do it, or I'm not going to do it? That's one thing. It's like, to your point, are you okay with 16 hours? Like, if you tell me that, I'm going to be like, right. I mean, how bad am I limping? Right. I mean, I'll be, and irony enough, as I was limping, I think I took 15 hours, but I mean, the point is I think that's the hard part, is having that conversation with the athlete to say, I think it's time to reset expectations. I think it's time to maybe, you were enthusiastic in March, it's September now. Let's talk about sort of where do we think we're going to be. I think that's got to be a fun conversation for you guys, or at least something that, like you said, I guess if you present math, maybe that's the thing you lean on. It's like, logic. Instead of saying overtly, hey, I don't think you're going to do this, you just go, here's what your training program has been looking like. Here's what your previous, and let the math speak for itself. That seems to be because everyone seems to be okay with that, right?
Well, and it goes 2 ways, right? I had an athlete that was doing so good, and I didn't want to tell him. I didn't want to put something in his head that might have stressed him out. But this athlete, going back to somebody that you're working with on your podcast, Elizabeth Simi, I'm coaching her as well, and she said something about red, right? Lots of red in Training Peaks. Well, this particular athlete, were also in Training Peaks, was all green. I mean, neurotically, all green. There was no yellow. There was no red. Every single workout that I put in Training Peaks, he said, he did it. Right?
That's like a unicorn.
Oh, I know, right? And I've had 2 athletes.
That's your guys' dream.
You're like, you wouldn't, if you didn't want me to do it, you wouldn't have put it in there. I'm like, well, there's that, right? But I build wiggle room in there on purpose. But this guy got every single workout done, and he was just lighting everything on fire. And I actually had the opposite conversation with him. I said, so, you keep telling me that you're really excited to break 12 hours, but I'm looking at all your training, and if we do the math on this, it's actually coming in significantly lower time than that. I mean, if we were to do the math there, what would you think that you would want to do? And he starts adding it up, and he's like, well, that's like 9.5 hours. And I said, yeah. That's really fast.
That's.
And he was we were 4 weeks out when I started finally presenting this information, and lights were going on in his head. He's like, oh my God, I'm so much faster than I thought I could ever do this. Because this particular athlete had actually come to me with a broken hip, right? And because he was an ultra runner, and we just moved him into swimming and biking, and then all of a sudden he got healed and was just an amazing athlete. So it was really fun to be able to have the conversations both directions on that one.
There's a unicorn, right? That's your guys' dream, isn't it? Like all green.
It was.
Like, wow, that exists.
I had one.
It's just like, is that what keeps you guys going as coaches? Like that one
Totally.
green, that
one day,
magical,
yeah.
that magical athlete that actually does
Wow,
what
they
they're
did the
supposed to do.
workout. They did
Right.
the workout. They did it again. Wow, they did the workout again. It's like all
like-
week. Oh my God.
It's like,
I don't know what to
wow.
do. Now I have to really work on my workouts. I want to really I really want to make them perfect for him. I had one athlete that came to me 15 or 16 weeks out from his first Ironman and said, I think I need a coach. I'm like, yeah. Was a good athlete, and we sat down and I decided to take him on and get him through his. He also said, he was like, do you think I can get under 12 hours? I'm like, I can't even approach that number at this point. And we kind of just said, I said, we'll put a plan together. We'll do it. If you trust the process and do the work, we'll see what comes out of it. So I got him to put that out of his mind and not think about that number. Like, don't think about the number. He did the workouts. He nailed everything. He nailed it all. Like lit everything up green. Was pushing him and getting through this thing. And we came to, night before the race or 2 nights before the race, and we chatted about it. And it's just kind of like, probably got a good shot at hitting your goal. The numbers look good, but let's just stick to the plan that we have. We've got a really good race plan, and let's make sure everything goes good. It's a hot race, all this stuff that goes through this thing. I'm getting text from his family while the race, because I didn't get to go to the race with him. And I just told them at that point, I said, oh, he's going sub 12, easy, like easy sub 12. Like, we've got this thing. He's got it in the bag. And they were like, oh, really? They were getting so excited about it and everything. He ended up coming in with an 11:20, 11:21 or something.
Yeah.
It was just like, kid was incredible. His run was just amazing. And he ran the whole run, and he paced himself just right through the whole race.
Nice.
He just did everything he was supposed to do. It was fantastic. So
that's
made
fantastic.
made my year.
All right. So parting thoughts here, Tim. What would be your kind of pearls of wisdom of those people that are watching this podcast that are like, they're tired, they're sore, they're hangry, they got it coming up, they're a few weeks away. What's the leave message you would like to leave them with?
I think don't be afraid of mobility. One of my athletes the other day asked, if you are ridiculously sore, is it better to have a subpar workout or no workout?
Oh, shut up.
What I say?
I sent you that text, you a-hole. I get that.
And my response was, a better question is, if I am so sore that I can't do a quality workout, what should I do? And those happen. I mean, you have those days where you either are so sore or you're so unmotivated. The quality over quantity, right? If you can't do a good workout, then do something else, right? If you can't get that bike in because you're just wrecked, that's a good day to listen to your body and say, you know what, maybe I'll just kind of lean into mobility, right? One of the things that by nature endurance athletes don't ever want to do is be in a gym or do mobility. And mobility, for anybody that doesn't know what that means, it's kind of like an end range of motion yoga type of stuff, right? To make sure that you're just touching the end ranges of motions of every joint that you have. Right, exactly.
It's
right.
You don't see that on it's swim, bike, run. Tim, what are you talking about? Mobility?
Right.
I didn't see that.
Right.
Fueling? What's that?
When you look at the absolute professionals, and you see them getting massages and you see them doing all the stretching and you see them, you have to think, well, if the professionals are doing it, what makes me so arrogant to think that I can get away with not doing it? So it's important to make sure that you're getting in not just the swimming and the biking and the running, but you're getting in the mobility exercises. And then, we'll look at multisport as 5 different disciplines. You've got swim, bike, run, nutrition, and mobility, right? So the nutrition is eating clean. And the mobility is just making sure that you're taking care of your body so that you can continue swimming and biking and running.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I mean, especially this time during the year, right? Because you are breaking down your body. You want to hit the start line, not just like you said for the 3 disciplines being good, but your body's feeling good. Your mind, you're in the right mindset. You've taken care of your body. You've done the workouts. You've done the training. Now just let it, execute on everything that you've been practicing, right? So
Yeah, and I think the
Tom?
quality, what you're saying, the quality over quantity is key, and having an extra rest day here and there that you're mobile, you're doing things, but you're not doing the workout. I think is fine. You're not losing your fitness in that sense, but you're taking care of your body and going through that process. I always tell people, you can't always see it on TV because they don't show it. But if you're watching live sports, or whether it's soccer or football or something else like that, watch the pregame thing. Go to the game early if you get to go, in person, and watch what the players are doing. They're doing all the simple little like calisthenics, right? We were just at a preseason game last week, and they're all in line on the field, and they're just hopping, and they're walking through, and they're stepping through, and you sit there and go, this is the stuff nobody wants to do. But these guys will do this on the field for an hour before the game starts. They will go through that range of end of range of motion. They will go through all of that stuff. And yet we walk up to an Ironman that we're going to spend 13, 14, 15, 16 hours at, and we don't even stretch. We don't even do anything. We don't do anything to loosen our shoulders up and everything. We just go out there and
100%. We just walk up and we're just like,
just hammer this thing. And I just sit there and go like, well, maybe they've got something here. I mean, they do this for a living, so it's more important to them. How about that mobility part comes to play? Like I know during the week, like sometimes you're throwing down workouts, you're getting them done, you're getting in the office, you're doing whatever, but you have to find time on the long weekends and some of the other stuff to actually, find that range of motion, go through all of that, do exactly what you said, get that mobility, because that helps the recovery. That actually helps you have a quality workout. Like you're not tight, you're not warming up. Yeah, I just warm up over the first 4 miles of the run, and then I'm good after that. It was like, well, yeah, that's why your back seized on you, or that's why something else, kind of goes on you. So I think that's critical, especially as you get older athletes. As we get older, I find that it's way critical for me to do a mobility routine that's 10 minutes every single morning. Whether I'm working out or not, I can't live without it. Like I'm walking funny if I don't. Like I go through this just nice kind of partly yoga, partly range of motion type thing. It helps me wake up, gets me moving. Like I highly recommend that to everybody. And even the younger athletes will appreciate it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then like you said, this time of the year with and also kind of a Zen moment for you, right? It kind of helps you center, because I'm really big on the idea that it's also, like you said, it's a mind thing as well, right? It's setting expectations, it's feeling appropriate. Like the race day, to your point, you're used to what's going on. You're giving yourself a chance during the day, or at least a couple times during the week, to just center yourself again and get ready to go. So when you do show up, you show up both physically and mentally ready to go. So Tim, we appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim.
Again, thank you for letting us see all the glorious medals you have over the 30, 40 years of racing, probably 50 years of racing. I don't know. It's a long time.
I'm not the new kid on the block anymore.
Back in '02 when you were.
No, thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we appreciate everybody, all your feedback and comments. Thanks for tuning in and following along. We really appreciate all of you. Give us some thumbs up from 5 stars. Subscribe. Hit the subscribe button wherever it appears on the screen. All of that stuff helps the algorithms and helps the podcast bump up in the lists, and more people can find us and hopefully learn a lot from everything we're doing. So, Tim, thanks again. Kenny, great as always. So everybody, we'll catch you the next time.